Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Helping Friendly podcast. We are here with you. We're going to be talking about a show from spring 1994. I was going to say fall. It's not fall. We talked about fall 94 a couple weeks ago. We're talking about a spring 94 show, 4/11/94. We have a special guest who we're going to introduce in 1 second. If you're watching on the video, you can see our special guest. But I want to say welcome to all of our fans, but I especially want to welcome the Brink Maniacs, which are a new group of fans who are the acolytes, the fans, the admirers of Brian Brinkman. The Brink Maniacs are the first official fan club of HF Pod 12 years in, and Megan and I don't have a fan club,
Nope.
but we might have a couple fans, but we don't have our own group of people who, who are there specifically for the takes and the wisdom of one person. And if you're interested in being part of the Brink Maniacs fan club, then you need to organize it yourself, because we're not going to do anything. We're just going to tell you that that's the name. And
Am I going to have to organize this in like an Apple
Yeah.
Note? Like,
you're going to have
Yes.
to
off my fans.
You're going to need
Exactly.
a spreadsheet. But
Exactly.
there might be merch ideas here. There's certainly should be maybe more voicemails about how awesome Brian is, because he likes hearing that. Maybe there's some bonus segments on Brian's
on
Brian's
his brilliant brain.
Brilliant brain.
We need some like flat brim dad hats.
Totally.
Just like
Yeah, there you go. That's
big
say
block
Brink
Yeah.
Maniacs.
letters. There it is.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that would be
That'd
awesome.
be so sick.
Okay, keep the voicemails coming. The phone number is 484-416-0488. We got a couple questions about whether we screen our voicemails to only have the good ones, and we don't. We just only get good ones. When we get critical ones, we play them. I mean, send us some bad
Yeah.
ones.
We played them.
Tell us what's horrible.
Just be prepared if you're going to call in with like a critical voicemail about how like we didn't include such and such show, or we didn't talk about such and such jam and such episode. Like, I'm down to get the criticism, but I'm going to sit you down and like we're going to talk through very specifics about fish and about fish history, and maybe about colonial American history, whatever I'm feeling that day. So like you can come with the hot takes, but like we need to actually engage in discussion about your evidence around these hot takes. Okay. So I just want to put that out there as like kind of a clarifying. Don't just come at us yelling.
And get ready for the Brink Maniacs to come after you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I'm saying.
You gotta.
I could use some of these defenders in my life. I don't know where they are.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that's enough of that. We are going to talk about 4/11/94 in just a second, but first we'll say hello, and welcome to our guest, Scott Chasolen Scott, I was going to say of Reprise, but Scott Chasolen of The Machine, of Reprise, of Ulu, of I'm probably missing some. Scott, a longtime musician, follow-up guest on HF Pod as well. You've been on before, so thanks, Scott, for coming back.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Scott, I understand that you are on your way to rehearse for Reprise.
Yes, on my way to a Reprise rehearsal in an undisclosed location. We have a lot of material to work on right now. So
yeah, there's 3 shows next week. There's Pembroke, Massachusetts at Soundcheck Studios, and then back at Park City Music Hall in Bridgeport, and then Sunday night at Stone Church in New Hampshire. And the show we're going to talk about today is from 4/11/94, which is from UNH in Durham, New Hampshire. And I want to talk, I think we all probably have questions for you, Scott, about, recreating these shows and what kind of work goes into all the stuff you guys do to prepare. But first, tell us quickly about your spring 94 experience, or where start us off with where you were in spring 94.
So my spring 94 experience was, I saw, maybe 8 shows on that tour. And it was the beginning of Fish's touring for that year. And I saw the Binghamton show on 4/9, the Buffalo show on 4/10. I skipped the New Hampshire show, which I regret very much. And then I saw the Beacon Run after that, which was 3 nights in New York, and then 3 or 4 shows after that. So like that whole chunk of shows, I saw them all except for the one that we're playing.
And we can talk about this in the context of the show, but so Brad Sands jumped on the trampolines during You Enjoy Myself. I think you told me, Scott, last time we were talking that was it the night before that Trey
Yes.
fucked up his ankle?
The night before this New Hampshire show on April 10th in Buffalo, Trey broke his ankle. He fell through a hole in the stage during sound check, and he was sitting on a stool for most of that Buffalo show. And at the end, he just kicked the stool away. It was like, fuck it, I can't sit here anymore. But,
Yes,
so
Trey.
the following, I know it was such a tragic thing because they had just started their tour and they were going to be on the road for 3 months at that point. And the next night during You Enjoy Myself, Trey sat in a chair and read the newspaper while Brad Sands jumped on the trampolines.
I love
So
it.
That's
awesome. Yeah.
And he had somebody fill in for him, you know, for the next few months whenever they did Yem. I think later in that week they had, remember Big Phil? He was a fan at that time.
Yeah.
He did it, I think, in Amherst or somewhere like that. Yeah, so Trey couldn't do it. But the New Hampshire show, I had so many regrets about missing that one. First of all, you have to realize it's 1994, and you can't just go on your phone and check the set list as the show is happening, right? There is no phone. You don't have a phone. You don't have email. You don't have anything. So the only way to find out what happened at the show was to wait until the lot the next day. You walk around, as people start showing up, you're like, who was at the show last night? Who's got a set list? And people would have written it down with pen and paper during the night, and then they'd show it to you, and you'd find out, like, oh man, I missed Colonel Corbin, and I missed Mockingbird, and I missed the Caravan opener, and it was, you know, a whole different thing to find out what was played the night before. And I was so bummed because I had never seen Corbin Mockingbird, and I really wanted to hear that, and they played it, of course, at the one show that I didn't go to. And Caravan is a jazz tune, and they opened their show with that in New Hampshire, and then closed the set with Cavern, which is a similar title, and they often did that. Sometimes they play them back to back, Caravan, Cavern. And Caravan was a Duke Ellington song, and Fish kind of made it into like this cool, groovy rock version of the jazz tune. And they did that a lot during those days. Like a few nights later at the Beacon, they played Take the A Train, which is also a Duke Ellington song. And Trey and Fishman were really into playing jazz, and they actually had a band called Bad Hat. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. And Fishman and Trey were in that with Jamie Macefield from Jazz Mandolin Project, and Stacy Starkweather was the bassist. And all they did was play jazz standards, and they just played locally in Burlington. So like, jazz was on the radar for Fish at that point, and you can hear it in their playing. You know, Trey definitely was studying bebop and those type of melodic lines and things like that. So I really dug that aspect of what they were doing around that time.
I got to ask you, just on the topic of Trey tearing a couple ligaments in his ankle, have you ever been physically injured on stage, a la this, or had to play with a physical ailment that kind of fucks up what you do well on stage, or like makes you readjust in some way like he did?
Yes, I've had injuries to my fingers, and it really sucks. It's really hard to play. I dropped my Rhodes on my index finger of my left hand, and if you guys know what a Rhodes is, it's a super heavy electric piano, and I literally smashed my finger on a parking lot asphalt between the Rhodes and my finger, and it blew up like 4 times the size, and I couldn't play at all with my left hand. This is in the middle of a tour with Hulu, and that was no fun.
What did you do? I mean, did you just play
what did you do?
one-handed? Like what was your approach?
I had to play with one hand for a while until it healed enough that I could play with that left hand again.
Man.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that I know one of your bandmates recently had a a puking issue on stage.
Yes.
And I feel like maybe that's something that happens. I feel like you guys all were like, oh yeah, I've been there.
Cal had a little problem at a PTF show where he projectile vomited in the middle of the Mango song. Which I'm not laughing at him. I know, it's awful. It's awful, but yeah, at the same time, it's hilarious. And I can only laugh at him because I've experienced that as well. I don't know if you want to hear that story. It's not.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Not family friendly.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Good.
All right. So I was on the road with Ulu, and we were playing in Milwaukee, and this place was called Thai Joe's, and it was a Thai restaurant, and it was our sax player's hometown. So everyone, all of his friends were there. It was huge. It was sold out, and we had all this food in the green room before the show. We were like, "Oh, this is amazing! Thai restaurant. They're feeding us all this food, and all we can eat, you know." And I ate so much food, and literally made myself sick. And right before we were about to start the show, I just was totally puking backstage. Couldn't go out on the stage, and the band had already gone out on stage and didn't realize that I wasn't there. And the first song of that night opened with a clavinet part that I'm supposed to play, and I'm not there, and everyone's just standing on stage like in front of this whole audience. Everybody's waiting, wondering what's happening, and tour manager comes running in and is like, "Dude, you got to get out there." I'm like, "I can't, I'm throwing up." So he pushed me out onto the stage, put this giant industrial-sized garbage can behind my Leslie cabinet so you couldn't see it. And literally every 5 minutes I went running behind Leslie to throw up, and then I'd go back to my keyboard rig and keep playing. It was the most horrifying experience.
Showbiz,
So,
it's not always glamorous, right?
No, but the show must go on, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. Scott, I have a question for you about 94 and just being there. Did you see shows in fall 94 as well?
Yes, I saw the majority of the fall 94 tour that year.
So did you see the change in the band that year? Like, we talked a lot about that when we covered the top 25 tours. Like, the growth from the spring tour all the way to the fall tour is pretty incredible. And the fall tour of 94, we have that, like, you know, one of the top 3-4 tours of all time. So I'd love to hear kind of what your perspective was after seeing so much of them that year.
Well, they definitely evolved quite a bit in that year. And I think where they arrived was just a place of absolute freedom. They would take all risks, any risks. There was basically no boundaries for where they would go musically, and that's what I loved so much about it. As the year went on, every single night, just something insane was happening that you couldn't believe that 4 musicians were able to do night after night after night. And even though, you know, in 94 it wasn't so much about the set list being unique and never repeating songs. It was a different climate as far as that goes. But musically what was happening, it was just so unpredictable. And, you know, 50-minute tweezers and 45-minute David Bowies and segues like you couldn't believe. And bluegrass was really on their radar at that point. You know, they were on the road with Jeffrey Mosier, and he was, you know, teaching them all about playing bluegrass, and it was just really a privilege to witness that. And I think I saw 55 shows that year.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. You really saw like a lot of the growth, like, and that year especially is so fascinating because it's kind of before Jerry's death, and I think there's so much that, like, the risks they were taking while growing is just always astounded me. But that's really cool that you got to see that development in person. Were you at the Grand Rapids show in the fall?
I was not at the Grand Rapids show.
That was my first show. I was wondering if you were there.
It was?
Yeah.
There was a couple of segments of the tour that I missed because I actually had to come home and deliver pizza for Domino's so I could make enough money to get back on tour.
Yeah, we had to do what we had to do for sure.
Oh man. So Scott, you guys have 3 shows to prepare for next week. We just announced 3 shows in March, with a 4th one on the way. So I guess my question is like, and I can maybe phrase this question in the context of this show because we wanted to talk about some of the highlights. I know that you guys have played a lot of these songs before, but like opening a show with Caravan, it's it puts you in a different era of Fish, really, sonically and I assume mentally. How do the rehearsals start when you look at a set list? I mean, do you go through the songs that you guys already know and kind of like put those aside for now and do the ones that you haven't played yet? Like, how do you approach that when you see a new tune on the set list?
That's exactly what we do. We start with the material that we haven't played before. With
Mhm.
these 3 shows coming up next week, there's 16 songs that we haven't done yet. So we'll probably start with a couple of the more difficult ones, Colonel Forbin or Famous Mockingbird, or
Yeah.
there's some pretty hard ones in there. And then reviewing the complex songs that we've already played, that's part of it too. Usually at first we just get the composition down so we can play it, and then the jamming is always sort of the last thing that we focus on, because that's where we can be more of ourselves within that.
Luckily, they're all really hard, so you don't need to,
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
like they're all hard.
This whole first set is like stacked. It's just like such an energetic, just like I mean, there's so much flow in this first set, but it is straight just power and energy the whole way, which is something I think that the 4 of you really have in common with Fish, is an ability to create like a really intense, wild energy with just 4 people. But this first set is really relentless. I'm excited to hear you play it because it's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited to play it too. I love the glide into Divided Sky. That's always
Oh, yes. I was just thinking about that when I was listening back to it, because they're so good at 94 in balancing like very silly stuff with really contemplative, beautiful stuff. And they do that so well in the first set.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Poor Heart and then Foam.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and you get a lot of this first set kind of goes in a really interesting, like you get from like jazz to bluegrass to weird prog to something like Fast Enough for You. And so like your first 4 songs are very different sides of Fish. And you think like Foam and Fast Enough for You back to back, like that is polar opposite ends of writing music. One is like trying to break down all these strange riffs out of time with each other, and then kind of everything comes back together, and it's really fast and everything changes quickly. And then Fast Enough for You is literally all emotion, and it's kind of like one of our first examples of that. I'm curious, as you guys are preparing, and especially as you're preparing like a spring 94 show versus you guys just did what was it, 12/28/95, like a big December 95 show. Do you find like the challenging aspect to be more recreating something like Foam or something like Divided Sky, or kind of finding the emotion of where the band was at in a song like Fast Enough for You?
Well, I think it's balancing all of those things. That's what's so great about going to a Fish show, is you get all of those styles and all of those different things all in one set. And the difficult part for us is just executing the technicalities. Like Divided Sky is very hard in some sections, and Foam is very difficult. I love Foam. It's one of my favorite ones to play. But Fast Enough, like that's something else. That's not technically difficult, but it's emotional. And in Reprise, sometimes we don't do exactly vocally what Fish did, so I end up singing Fast Enough for You, because I think it's just more of like where I'm at as a vocalist, and it just seemed to work for my voice. And so that one, I love singing that song. And I don't know if people will be upset because, the keyboardist is singing it, not the guitarist. I'm sure Cal could sing it great too, but sometimes we pass the vocals around in a little bit of a different way. But so maybe that answers.
That's so cool. I'm really excited to hear you play this Foam, because Paige has that gorgeous, huge solo in this version. I was thinking about that, and that's awesome. It must be exciting to get to do that one.
In Foam?
Yeah.
Yeah, Foam has a great piano solo that
Yeah.
kind of hands it off like a baton in a relay to the guitar solo. I love that in Foam.
Yeah, in this version, like, it gets really quiet. It's, like, almost, like, silent, and then Trey just goes
Yeah.
off. Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
It does get silent. That's something that they were doing in '94 in
Oh,
some of
yeah.
their improv
Mhm.
stuff, where they would bring the volume so quietly that you almost couldn't hear them at all. And sometimes they would go to complete silence, and there would always be that one idiot in the crowd that's like, yeah, you know, like
I know.
during those moments.
So bad.
Those
So
tapes are
bad.
like, it's so quiet and everyone's being respectful, and then there's that one guy.
Totally.
You mentioned this is your guys' first time playing Forbin's Mockingbird. Are you guys going to attempt to create your own narration? Or are you going like based off of the transcript, like word for word, what Trey says? Like, are you guys just going to do the straight through old school Forbin's Mockingbird? Have you thought this through?
You know, that's a good question, man. I think we have to do a narration of some sort. At our very first weekend of shows, we played Harpua. And,
Okay.
And Cal did an approximate narration. It was Sugar Bush '94, so it was the Jimmy got hit in the head with a comet.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. And this Forbin is a great narration. I mean, Trey always had a way to tie in the local area to the story.
Yeah.
So you know, he has it like you're rising above the arena, you see the field house, you see, and he mentions different things like that are actually there geographically. And then, you know, eventually it gets into outer space and somehow you land in Gamehenge.
and this one, you go through the pleasure hole. The when he talks about falling in the night before. Yeah. This is a good one. There's a lot of like fun stuff in here that you can play with.
I think Cal will probably do a narration, you know, loosely based on what was done that night. That's what I would think, but we haven't gone through it yet, so I don't know.
How about the Big Ball Jam? It's a contentious topic here on HF Pod. I'd love to hear what you're going to do for that.
Well, what are your thoughts on the Big Ball Jam? I'd like to hear that too.
I am not a fan. I'm sure in the room, I don't even know if I ever saw one. I don't think I ever saw one. In the room, I'm sure it was really fun. Listening back, torture. It's just like it sounds horrible. I appreciate what it was used for as like a connective tool with the audience and like an ability to show them that they were part of the show, which I think was so crucial to Fish's development. But yeah, I could go without.
That's how I feel, and I never saw it, you know, in person. So
yeah.
I'm sure it was
too
different.
Much of noobs.
On the tapes, it's rough, man. It's like
it's so rough.
I mean, it's only 3 minutes, but it's just like literal cacophony, you know. So like, it's but in the room, I don't know. Like, I guess we should discuss that. Are we bringing balls?
Well, first let me tell you how I feel about the Big Ball Jam as an audience member, because I saw many of them night after night after night. They did it over and over again, and it's just as brutal in the room.
I feel so validated right now.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad I could provide that for you.
I remember reading about the Big Ball Jam when I was first getting into Fish, and I was like, this sounds like the coolest thing in the world. And then I got my first tape with a Big Ball Jam on it, and I was like, wait, what? That's what it sounds like?
Yeah.
Like reading it's one of the few moments where reading the description about music sounds cooler than the actual music.
Yeah, exactly.
I would agree. I mean, it was fun to witness. I gotta say, in all of the shows that I saw then, I never got to hold the ball. You know, maybe that's why I'm so bitter about it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Good point.
Because they would react to whatever was happening. There was 3 balls, one for Paige, Mike, and Trey, and Fishman would just keep this kind of maniac groove going the whole time. And whatever was happening with the ball, respective to each band member, they would try to musically say whatever was happening. So if someone was holding the ball and shaking it, Trey would imitate that with what he was playing. And it was fun the first time, but over and over again, it was kind of rough, just as you guys said. What are we gonna do? I have no fucking idea.
Oh,
I mean,
now
you
I'm
got your own
excited.
Brad Sands here. I think
You do.
RJ, you've got to bring the balls and
Yes.
throw them out on stage. And I feel like
Yeah.
RJ needs to jump on the trampolines
He's
during
doing
this
the
show. Just
tramps
as
for
like
sure.
this is
For sure.
That seems like not what we should do. Scott, what?
Come on,
What?
RJ. This is your chance to jump on the trampoline on the stage
know.
with. That'd be
That's
so
true.
fun.
RJ,
Scott,
are you
what
coming to the show?
Well, that's a good question. I am coming to the first two. I don't know if I'm coming to Sunday night yet. So now this is a whole different discussion.
sorry, I'm
Well,
putting you on the spot
Who's
here.
gonna throw the balls out if you're not there, man?
Oh
I
my
know.
God.
Well,
Who
I
is?
know. Shit.
Well, like the
Okay.
bartender's gonna do it? Come on.
I know.
He's got other stuff to do.
How would they even be able to figure that out? But Brian, what were your? Do you have any highlights from this first set? Like anything that particularly stuck out to you?
I mean, I think two things really stuck out. Scott was talking about the caravan being so special. I was just looking this up. This was the only time it ever opened a show, which is a really cool way into the overall show. This song hasn't been played since 12/29/96, and like I can't really see why. I kind of get Take the A Train, like it's like a basic entry level like jazz standard that you like kind of have to learn. Like I guess Caravan falls in that category, but it also sounds like something that they could segue out of right now. So I'm just gonna advocate for that to come back. But Meg, you were talking about, and Scott, you mentioned this based on how many shows you saw in summer '94, or throughout '94, excuse me. Like this is such a different band from what we're going to hear within 10 months. And even in some ways, this is a very different band from what we heard in August, '93. This is a band that just released Hoist. So like, it's a very tight show. It's a very kind of forward rock driven type show. But it was really interesting to me in the Divided Sky. You just started to hear as the composition was peaking, these just kind of back and forth little moments, and like they only last like 10 seconds. We're not talking like huge diversions here, but there's definitely like you can start to hear the band kind of kicking around ideas in their head and seeing what can we do to distort the expected peak of this song so that people are thrown off a little bit, and the peak is going to come. It's not like they're changing the way the Divided Sky ends, but like I could just hear towards the end of that them kind of kicking around ideas and figuring out like how do we escape how this song is written, which feels like such a huge foreshadowing of where the year is going to go.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's so much change during this time. I mean, one thing I was going to ask Scott, I don't know how long it lasted when like Julius was new this tour, and they had those like they were like playing the horn lines within the song, and then they kind of dropped that. I don't know if that might have been this tour, like because I think even by fall '94, I don't think they were like carrying those little horn lines over. Just to Brian's point, is there anything like musically that you see as kind of like how you would characterize it, in this spring time period that's different from even like fall '94, especially when you're thinking about playing?
I think in the spring they were still, for the most part, keeping the songs within a certain structure, and it wasn't just total adventurous improvisation, Like, the You Enjoy Myself basically follows the same formula that, I mean, none of those big jam vehicle songs were in this particular show, actually, so, but the nights before that in Binghamton, the Mike song from that night is pretty insane, and that was the first time I had ever heard Mike's song, and they were still doing trampolines in that song as well. I don't know if you guys realize that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were trampolines during the Mike's Jam and insane strobe lights with smoke.
Oh yeah.
That was the vibe during that song, and I was losing my mind during that part. And yeah, I mean, this was the pathway that would lead them towards much more fearless jamming and improv later in the year. But you're starting to see signs of it here and there. I really love, like you were saying, Brian, about the jazz tunes. McGilla was actually Fish's version of a short little jazz jam, you know.
Yeah.
And I love that they played that a lot, especially in this spring of '94. They actually opened that Binghamton show with McGilla, and I was so excited about that. And it's similar to Caravan in that, you know, jazz vibe. It's based on a 1-6-2-5 chord progression and B flat. You know, if we're gonna get super geeky here, why not?
That's what we're here for.
And, all right, we're here for super geeks.
It adds it's a very different feel to the start of a Fish show than a rock song with a jazz song later. And like you're right, having Caravan open this and then McGilla later in the set, it kind of dominates the show in a way that the horns were at the Beacon run, I believe, at least one of those nights. But it's kind of the first time since like 91 where like horns are a major part of or jazz is a major part of a Fish show here. It's a really cool addition.
And I think they were doing that a lot at the beginning of this whole year, thinking about how different styles of music can play in their shows. And this show is like the 7th show on this tour out of 44 shows. This was our top tour 22 out of top 25. And you can see a difference even in development throughout this tour. You know, it's a full country loop. And I think by the end of the tour, they're playing totally different shows out West. And so it's pretty cool to see the development even just within this tour. I mean, which makes sense because it's such a monster tour. But this had to feel challenging when they just get out. They're on this 7th show or the 6th show and Trey hurts himself. It had to be hard to come back. But you see them come back the next night and just play this like incredibly energetic first set. And I think that's what, you know, Fish was doing so well in '94 is just playing so tight. And you can hear that in this first set, especially. I think the first set's better than the second set, too, just as far as like flow.
I thought it flowed a little bit nicer. Yeah. Your point about like early on in this tour, Trey hurting himself, like this is a really big pressure tour. They've just released Hoist.
Yeah.
This is a lot of marketing behind it. This is right around the time we talked about this, where Blues Traveler and Dave Matthews Band have put out hit records, and Fish is kind of trying to figure out what that looks like. And Trey gets hurt in a way that, like, you know, he's not a stage performer, but he does kind of need to aggressively stand out on stage and showcase, you know, his skills. And if he's got a boot on his foot, it messes with that. And so what do? Of course, they like turn it into part of the gag. Like Trey sitting on stage, reading the newspaper and like joking around, Brad Sands coming out on stage to jump on the trampoline. Like Scott said, like fans doing that over the next couple of weeks. Like it's a band that you're seeing even when there's challenges that they have to face at like a really important time. They're still able to like inject some humor into it, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Scott, let me ask you a question, just because like we did this top 25 tours project, which we've mentioned a few times, where we like went through and, you know, we got into serious depth on all of it, and apparently our fans really loved it because they kept coming back and sending us nice messages. But what do you think like pushed them between spring into summer into fall of '94 to like the point where now, you know, 6 months from this show we're getting like a 40-minute jam? Like, do you think that this was like a conscious effort to push themselves? Do you think they just found themselves like with more space to explore? Like from a musician's perspective, I'm just curious, like how do you rationalize that or explain it if you're thinking about that evolution?
I think what happens in a band that improvises a lot is when you play every night, like Fish was doing that year, you just develop insane chemistry together, and that's just how it unfolded for them. I mean, they played that year, I don't know, they played over 100 shows, I'm sure.
They played over 100 shows for like 5-6 years in a row, like during that time.
Yeah, they just kept doing this.
It was
crazy.
crazy. It was crazy. Like 140 shows. It was wild. Yeah.
It's crazy. So crazy. Just what happens when you play night after night after night after night. And, you know, maybe there was a conscious discussion that happened, like let's really stretch out on the improv, or maybe not. Maybe that was just organic and it happened that way. You know, when I was on the road with Lulu a lot, we did a couple of years where we had, 200 plus shows in 2000, 2001, and Ulu was complete improvisation within, instrumental music. And we found ourselves doing the same thing, where we would stretch out on songs, not ever discussing anything musical, just whatever happened on stage. You kind of develop this telepathy with your bandmates, and that's what Fish had going on too, and they still have that now. It's more refined. I think back then it was so raw and just so exciting in a way, because that had never happened for them before,
Can I ask you about, like, because what you just spoke about something that I think is like the dividing line between the non-musical, like the non-musician fans and the musician fans, is like what happens on stage when big things happen, when, like, huge jams happen or like a huge show happens. And you said, like, you guys weren't really planning for these extended jams. They just kind of happen because you build up this telepathy. Do you find that it's just kind of one of those things that over time something amazing happens during a show that if you had talked about, if you had planned for, if you had tried to position yourself to do, never would have happened? You kind of just have to, like, build up the reps and get to that point? Or is it sketching out ideas and kind of having a, like a weekly meeting, like any sort of team in a company would have, of like, we're going after this goal, this is how we go after it? Is a little bit more of like a vibe than that?
I don't think it works like that. It's not like a business proposal. You can't you can't put an outline of how you want to make music. It comes from the heart, and it comes from the soul of the people who are creating it. And I can't speak for what happens inside of the minds of the guys in other bands, but the way it works for me is you listen to everybody else on stage, and you respond to what everybody's playing, and when everybody's able to have that kind of a conversation within the music, there's kind of no limit to where you can go, and I'm sure that's what happened for Fish too. It's just, you can't plan it. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. No, that's really cool insight. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, man.
Also appreciate that we're getting a dash cam or dash light podcast here. This is a first. This is great.
So awesome.
This is my stroke show.
Just stay safe in that car. Scott, let's talk quickly about this second set, because this is interesting. As I was listening to it in the context of this conversation, I think I've heard you guys play almost all these songs in person, except obviously we talked about Forbin Mockingbird. A few of them were played at the 12/28/95 recreation, but it's interesting when you think about, like, some of those songs like Maze or 2001, or songs that you played a 95 version, you played a 97 version, you played a 99 version, now you played a 94 version, like, and you might have played a 94 version of 2001 before, maybe Sugar Bush or whatever, but
yeah, we did.
Like, when you go to prep for these, I know that Cal kind of like calibrates his pedals and the effects he uses to the era, but to me that seems like some of the most complicated part is, like, figuring out, you don't want to accidentally, like, go into the 97 funk jam in 2001 just because it's fun, so how do you mentally stay in that era during these shows?
Well, we have to remember what was going on in that year, on that tour. For our shows next week, 2001 is in all three of them, and we haven't announced what the other two shows are, but two of them are non-2000, which are very straightforward, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then one of them is stretched out into like a huge jam, which happened a few years after 94. Every time they played 2001, which basically was every night at this point, it was just exactly what it was. Structure, no jamming, and it was cool, but I personally love stretching that one out, because it's, it's in C minor, and that's a great key to stretch out on, and just, it's a fun groove, and super cool. So we just have to remember what happened in the original show. Like, this 2001 doesn't get jammed out, so we're not going to play it that way. And that's the same that goes for the other songs. You know, as far as the tones go, yeah, Cal is dialed into what Trey had going on in his rig in the early 90s, and in 94, 95 is much different than 94 as far as, you know, he had a Leslie cabinet in 95 and was experimenting with like this tremolo effect, like this kind of sound. And in 94, he didn't have any of that. It was more, he had this crazy pedal that would, I forget what pedal it was. I remember him explaining it at some point in 94. And Cal is dialing in, you know, a lot of the stuff that Trey was doing. And as far as keys go, Page didn't have that much to work with at that point. He had his piano, he had a Hammond organ, and he had a Rhodes. And he didn't have the clavinet until July of 94. So Big Birch, that was the first show that he ever used the clav.
Wow, that's crazy.
I was at that show, and I watched the roadies take the clavinet off the bus and carry it to the stage. And was like, oh my God, he's got a clavinet. This is such a great day.
Oh my God, that's so cool that you saw that. That's incredible.
I saw that. I carried it from the bus to the stage. And he barely played it that night. We did recreate Big Birch over the summer, and I only got to play the clav for 5 minutes.
Come on, Paige.
He was really shy with the clavinet at first until he got more comfortable playing it, you know, maybe the following year or two. And now it's a huge part of his sound.
One thing I was noticing in the second set is Trey goes to the Sunshine of Your Love riff quite often. And it kind of got me thinking of, like, you know, the kind of riffs that you learn when you learn how to play guitar, learn how to play piano, and like you come back to. And they're just like these familiar, like Trey has it with Streets of Cairo. It's like, when in doubt, the Streets of Cairo riff comes out, and then the jam can like go from there. Are there any riffs for you that like you learned and just particularly hit you, you know, as a piano player, and like you throw out in the middle of jams just kind of as like comfort food almost?
Oh boy. I don't know if there's any specific songs or riffs that come through. I mean, I think as listeners, we hear things that other musicians play and think, oh, they're quoting something, but they might not be doing that intentionally. Like, I don't really quote things intentionally, but I think my influences come through, even if it's not a direct quote. I don't know. I don't think there's anything specifically that I would.
Our good friend Ryan Storm would call these coincidental chord progressions, where we as the listener are like, oh, he's playing that, and you're just like, no, I just play in this area, and so it works.
Right. I think that, like, for me personally, that's probably more of that.
Scott, for those people who are listening who haven't seen Reprise, I think we've been talking about, you know, recreating these shows to the era or to the form, but you guys also really go off the map in terms of improv. Like, I think for the 12/2/95 show that was covered last time you all played at Bridgeport, you know, that tweezer jam is like iconic in for a very specific riff, and you guys took it in like a totally different direction, which I think was like really fun for the people there. And like that Reba that night, that was when Cal had the, like, you know, 3-minute peak solo during Reba, which is not exactly what happens on the show. So how do you guys think about that? It was really awesome.
Very amazing.
Really great. How do you guys think about that? Like, do you have conversations about these jams where they go in a specific direction, or do you just try to stay in the moment and stay true to the kind of playing?
Well, it depends on the jam and on what song it is. Like, particularly on that Reba from Park City, which was 12/2/95. I think that's actually the song where Cal's contacts fell out.
Yes, I remember that. He had to like go get his glasses.
Fell out. He had to go get his glasses, and I made Jerky Boys jokes while he was getting them. My shoes and my glasses, so I have them. But that's a really good question, RJ, because the last show that we did was 12/28/95 Worcester Centrum, and there's a tweezer on that show that is 22 minutes long, and there's some really specific things that happen during that jam, and we talked about them, and we tried to hit the main points that happened while still trying to be ourselves. And I think in the 12/2/95 New Haven show, we didn't really outline the original tweezer jam at all. We just kind of did our own thing with it. So I think it depends on what happened originally, and if there were things that were characteristic enough that we feel, oh, we should quote that, or we should reference that, you know, because sometimes that can actually inhibit us from playing and being ourselves if we're in a.
I really hope he comes back. I'm really interested in what he was saying.
It's like right on the cusp.
Yes,
There it is. There it is. Say what you were going to say.
Sorry, I got a phone call. If you're thinking while you're playing, then you're not in the moment anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So we always have this discussion, like, well, how much of this do we want to predetermine, or do we want to just go and play and be who we are? And I don't know if that's disappointing for people who come out to hear a specific show. They're like, oh, I was at that show, and that's not how that tweezer went. But, you know, we're not Fish either, and we're for other musicians who, you know, have a lot to say with our own voices. And I think that's always the question, the philosophical question is, are we going to play what we feel, or are we trying to recreate exactly what happened? So it's a challenge. I don't know.
Well, it's one of the, if you're covering a band that doesn't really improvise in concert, like the goal then is just like, how do we nail the songs? How do we give people the exact feeling? But like, what is the exact feeling you're looking for from a Fish show? It's the unknown. And you're kind of giving the best of both worlds, where we'll give you the show structure and we're going to think about how they approach this jam, but we're also going to interpret it from our own hearts and minds. And, you know, like we're going to show how we would play in that kind of broad style. Have you guys ever thought though about like charting out a jam and trying to play like approaching it like a composition, or are you guys just like, let's not go down that road?
Yeah, we have actually. I did chart out that tweezer from 12/28/95 when we played at the Iron Horse last month.
Wow.
I wrote it out, and we had it on stage so that it wouldn't require us to remember things. Like, here's the map. If you want to glance at it, you can, and that way you're not digging into your memory. You'd be like, oh God, what comes next? What happens next? Because as soon as that happens, then you're not creating in the moment anymore. Exactly.
Totally.
So, and you know, those guys are such creative monsters. Adrian and Chris and Cal, like they have their own ideas constantly, all the time, musically that come through. And I'm sure that even if we didn't follow what Fish did, that those guys would have so much to say regardless. But yeah, I think the map is helpful especially when something is that long, 22 minutes long. It's like, well, you know, there's a lot of twists and turns that happen. And in that particular jam, there was a lot of cool things that happened. There was some vocal outbursts that just came out of nowhere. They just started singing random riffs that they were playing, and then there was a whole like synth part, and then a bass solo, and it was like a whole composition in itself. And that's what was amazing about 95. I know that's not the year we're really talking about, but it felt to me like in that year they were composing improvisationally on the spot. It almost was like, okay, this is a complete, you know, this is a complete idea.
Yeah,
I felt that too when we listened to Fall 95. I don't know if you guys felt that, but I definitely felt that.
Yeah, definitely. Is there a certain jam or song or era that you are just dying to cover? Like, is there, you know, do you just think back like, oh, I really want to play this jam?
We're already doing it. 94 is the year for me. I love these shows so much, and anything we get to play from this year is my favorite, and I'm so psyched to to do this New Hampshire show and whatever else comes up in the future. You know, having been part of so many of those shows, it's like, it's so meaningful to me personally. And, you know, where I was at in my life in 1994, Ulu hadn't started yet. I was not sure how I was going to become a musician. I just knew it was going to happen somehow. And watching those guys do it night after night was just, you know, that sealed the deal for me. Okay, I want to do that. And now getting to actually do that specifically from the shit that I saw is kind of this full circle craziness that I'm just so excited about.
It's really meta.
It's meta.
Yeah, 30 years later.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Scott, I know you're on your way to rehearsal, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Any other questions, Megan, Brian, for Scott?
The only question I didn't get to ask is, do you have a favorite Fish song to play? And have you guys played it live yet?
Oh boy. Well, we've done 96 songs so far.
Wow, that's a lot. That's wild.
That's a lot. And only 8 shows. I'm trying to think if there's any my favorite. I really love playing Foam. That might be my favorite right now. That'll change tomorrow, but that's my favorite right now.
It's got to be one of those that, like, when you actually like nail it, it's just you feel like you've just leveled up.
Yes, we haven't done that yet. When we played it at Big Birch, I made a couple mistakes and I was very upset with myself. I'm a huge perfectionist and I don't tolerate my own mistakes very well. I'm much more tolerant of other people's mistakes. So I'm looking forward to getting another chance at Foam.
Love it.
That's killer. Is there a moment that you've had that has been kind of your favorite moment playing with Reprise so far? Like one moment that stood out of being like, that was just such a killer moment?
Yes, I think when we played in Asbury a few months ago and we did the 6/28/2000 PNC show, we had a couple of improv things that happened during the set that were really elevating for me, like the bathtub gin, and maybe the Weekapog had some cool stuff. No, not the Weekapog, the bathtub gin from that.
Yeah,
was one of my favorite things. And then when we played at Lark Hall, we did the Bring the Dude show, and the Weekapog from that was one of my favorite things that we've done.
Nice.
Scott, I just want to say that I've been I think I've seen 6 out of 8 Reprise shows, so I've been to a lot of them. And I talk to people every time, and no one has ever said I wish they had played that jam more like the original. So I think you know, exactly the balance you guys are striking is really resonating with people. And it's interesting to talk to people like at that Park City show, because the show you guys did there was so like such an iconic show, 12/2/95. So many people from that, you know, area in Connecticut had gone to that show. So many people were like, that was my first show ever. And
Yeah.
and you guys kind of like put your own spin on it, but at the end of the night, people were like, I can't believe I got to like revisit my first show in a different way. So I think like the putting the spin on it while keeping, you know, the true to the era is like really, that balance is really working.
Great. I hope so. I hope that people feel that way, and I'm glad people feel that way. I'm so happy that people are checking out what we're doing, and you know, if it brings you back to a show that you saw or allows you to experience a show that you didn't see, you know, that's what it's all about. So that's really cool.
love it.
Yeah. And you're not announcing what you're playing at Park City, huh? When are we getting this? I want to know what I'm going to see next week.
Tomorrow.
Okay,
you
cool.
wait?
Okay. I can wait till tomorrow. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
we kind of moved up the announcement because of this show. Scott was like, shit, I guess we better get ready to push this back a little bit.
Yeah.
So just so everyone knows, you can go to repriseband.com to get the dates. There's 3 shows next week: Soundcheck Studios, Park City Music Hall, and then Stone Church. And then in March, there's a 4th show that's going to be announced hopefully tomorrow. But There are 3 shows in March as well, including Saratoga Springs, Brooklyn Bowl, New York, and then Dharma Bums in New Hope, near where I am. So check out repriseband.com. Get tickets. Come check them out. Come say hi. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun.
It was great. Thank you so much for having me on. You guys, I love talking with you about this stuff.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks for
See
making my
y'all
drive
soon.
that much more
Yeah.
pleasurable.
Yeah,
We'll
I'll
get
see
you
you next
again.
week.
Yeah.
I'm actually
All
lost
right.
now, so let me get back to this.
Okay.
Oh, no.
All right. See you, Scott.
All right,
I'm
later.
removing
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Bye, Scott. See
Bye,
ya.
Scott.
All right, guys. So Brian, do you want to do any sort of programming update, or we're back to our week to
We
week?
have something to do before we leave today.
Yeah, I can't believe you, after all of the aggro RJ that we've gotten in this last week,
Right?
both in our text chat about
Unbelievable.
Talking about
draft,
me?
as well
Come
as
on.
Ohio State, their dominating win on Friday evening, as well as the Philadelphia Eagles, as well as RJ celebrating the fact that the Sixers are not going to be taken out of a public fund to build a $1 billion
It's true.
stadium,
True.
which is a win for the city of
It
Philadelphia.
is.
What else has happened in your favor? I'm trying to think.
I feel like there's just been such a good week for RJ.
It's kind of
There's
everything.
something else.
I can't remember.
I don't know.
I
I
think that
feel
was
like
it.
maybe there was like a crown that I had to give to you. I don't
think-
remember. Do you remember, Brian?
I'm just putting this up in advance just to make sure that nobody crosses the gaslighting line here. Let's get a banner up here really quickly for our Fish Show 2024 draft winner,
Oh, man.
Champion.
Unbelievable. Champion.
RJB.
Thanks, guys.
We're getting this up there. RJ,
Congratulations on your
you
win,
have-
RJ.
Well, I just,
Well
you have the floor. Please go ahead, share your thoughts.
guys, this is a great month. We got Ohio State in the national championship. We got me winning a draft. We got me going to the Relics 50th anniversary party on Wednesday. We got me going to 2 reprise shows next week. And we have me being friends with Brian and Megan, which really is
Barely
the best
after
prize
last
of all.
week. Barely.
Hey, it was a tough match. Everybody, both teams played hard. All 3 teams played hard. But, at the end of the day, there can only be one winner. And 99 times out of 100, it's Megan. And, I'm just happy to have my one.
Then you and
I
I
just
just
wanna
like flip back and forth for half the other times.
I just want to tell you
Exactly.
that RJ, you have now won the same amount of drafts that I've won.
No.
So it's
Is that true?
And yeah, although I probably won't give you as much shit as you gave me after this last one, but we'll see. Maybe you're going to have to start earning more shit from me, because I just want to let the listeners know that it did not stop after we went off air. I continued to be harassed via text.
I don't even know what you're talking
from
about.
these 2. Yep, it's true.
So who won? I'm totally blanking on this. Who won our Fish Years draft back last year?
The first draft we did,
Yeah,
me.
that was Meg. And then I won the Tweezer draft. And then RJ won the summer 2024 draft. And then Meg. So I am now lagging behind you guys. This is really, really annoying.
For your idea.
For my
the
idea.
Maniacs need to get behind Brian,
yeah,
build him up
seriously.
here.
I've been thinking on my long walks with the dogs. What is my strategy next time? I'm just gonna abandon the shows I like and just try to appeal to the masses like Megan does.
Oh my God. I just want to let everybody know
here we
that
go.
I was called a pop song this week. It was so offensive. Like, me, of all people, called a pop song. Unbelievable. I pick shows that I like, Brian, just so you know. I really like 223, 24 quite a bit. Liked that show quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
Like 7:30, quite a bit. So much that I picked it in the first round, even though I probably didn't need to.
Yeah.
Thereby
That's true.
blowing
That's
my
true.
whole draft. So
That's
there
true.
you go.
Quite
You
a
did
bit.
not need to. You did not need to pick 7:30 first. I think that was.
I
think that was
know.
it.
I know.
I
It
think
was
that
my
actually
biggest
does prove that
mistake.
you were just doing your, you were doing your best to just
Yeah.
follow your heart.
I thought that was the best summer show, and it was too stacked of a category. So I've learned my lesson. We all make mistakes, even the best of us.
I learned my lesson too. Nobody gives a fuck about Albany 2024 and the fact that
Albany
I tried to like
killed us.
hold that category as like that will
I
save
know.
me. Nobody cared. Nobody cared.
Listen,
I
Not a
know.
single person.
you know
cared.
who cares?
Has anyone ever texted you in the
Yes.
last 2 months and been like, "Hey, dude, this happened in Albany"?
Yeah, the
No.
Brink
No,
Maniacs.
but you were
They're
trying
back
to bring
listening to
maniacs.
Albany. That's all they're doing is
What-
listening to Albany.
but you were
You know what else
trying
they're
to
listening to?
protect-
They're
What?
listening to that 85 whipping post. They're still listening to that, trying to just make sure they understand.
I
the
will
importance.
die on that hill. You know what? You want to align yourself with fish noobs who are like, "Oh, I'm not going to listen to 85 fish because it's too early and the soundboarding quality just isn't really there." Like, come on, dude. That is the show. That is the jam that created fish. Jesus.
How could you not have that in your draft? It's unbelievable.
I don't understand. So, back to regularly scheduled programming. Now that we've gotten out of the way that RJ finally won a draft. Great job, RJ. What are we doing next week?
We don't even to be announced.
You're choosing it, aren't you, Brian?
I'm happy to choose it if you want me to choose it.
I think you should choose it.
Choose
Okay.
that.
Freak Maniacs would appreciate it.
I will choose a show for next Monday. We're going to do it Monday. RJ came up with a great idea. Next Monday is going to be a bit of an intense day for us, for large parts of this country. Don't come at me if you're like, "Hey man, I'm super stoked," and now you're oppressing me. Like, hey, you can be stoked, okay? That's fine. But we're going to create some alternative programming for next Monday. We're going to go live what time?
12 o'clock.
12:30?
Noon.
12 o'clock. 12
12
o'clock Eastern. We'll be taking our oath of fish office, and we're accepting donations no less than $1 million to come and watch us talk about a show to be announced. But we'll do that next Monday. And then what do we've got another episode coming up in January. We've also got a library card episode. There's a lot happening around here, and you can tell it's the early part of this year because we have no idea what we're actually talking about until we sort out a series for ourselves.
Yep. We have a lot of admin work to do, but you know us, we'll do it.
We'll do it. We'll
Mhm.
always do it. And I do hope that people understand that, the 25 Top Tour project was amazing. And we were listening to 30 to 40 shows a week, at least parts of them, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on who you are. But we were doing a lot. And so we're kind of we're listening to one show a week, but we're going to keep bringing you amazing banter, in-depth discussion and analysis, and more Brian Brinkman. So everyone just stay tuned.
And we're going to have a new
continue to be awesome.
series. It's just not going to start till the spring, right? We're going to do a bigger project. It's just going to start a little bit later. We're not abandoning that. We just need a little respite to do something else besides listen to fish all the time.
A lot of random shows through March, and then early April we will start the new series, which we'll be deciding and announcing here shortly, just as long as some people read the doc.
Yep.
Yeah,
We'll do
RJ,
it.
read the doc.
Everyone read the doc. We'll see you later. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.